Hi everyone, this is Rick from MarriageFitnessReview.com, and I thought I would offer a video on dealing with adultery. Adultery is a very, very common situation that many of you may be facing right now, and there's plenty of support in the Marriage Fitness program about how to deal with adultery, so I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about the do's and the don'ts and things you can expect. So, as I just mentioned, adultery is very common, and possibly as many as half of all marriages will be affected by adultery at some point. It's not a game ender. There's no reason to expect it to end your marriage. And in fact, only about 30% of marriages affected by adultery do end in divorce. And moreover, adultery can provoke a marriage renewal process eventually. Now, you may be in the position of suspecting that there's an affair, but you're not sure. And how do you know? Well, this is not by any means a comprehensive list, but there are a few warning signs that you might look for. First of all, this is a really, really big tip. Your spouse becomes secretive. They begin to hide things from you. Perhaps your spouse has a laptop, you walk in the room, and he or she closes the laptop down, or shuts off applications, or perhaps password protects things from you that never were protected before. You may notice if you pay cell phone bills that you see a number of repeated phone calls or texts to an unusual phone number, one that you've never seen before. There may be physical evidence, anything from the proverbial lipstick on the collar to unexplainable receipts from restaurants, hotels, and things like that, or any of a number of other things. And finally, of course, your spouse might come clean. We'll talk about what to do in that situation. So, what do you do if there is an affair that is affecting your marriage? Well, the first thing is you need to accept your responsibility. And this is a really, really hard pill to swallow. We feel betrayed if we are victims of adultery. However, the fact of the matter is, a marriage typically will only fall victim to adultery if both partners have allowed that marriage to deteriorate to the point where there isn't a strong enough connection to sustain that marriage. If you think about the early days of your marriage, chances are there really was no room for there to be an affair because you were so in love and so connected with each other. Over time, that connection does diminish, and the more it diminishes, the more likely it is for an affair to rear its ugly head in your marriage. So you do have to accept some responsibility. That doesn't mean we condone our spouse's behavior, but we do need to accept some responsibility. Second thing is to be patient. Okay? Affairs do take time to wind down. And you're going to see, I don't think you should confront it. But what you should do is engage your spouse with unconditional love. This is part of your marriage vows, for better, for worse. And you're definitely in the for worse category. Your spouse forgot the part where they said, forsaking all others. And you just have to be patient and willing to engage your spouse again and again with unconditional love. And unconditional love does mean, regardless of how you're being treated, you still love your spouse. Here's some things you shouldn't do. The first thing is file for divorce. What's that going to solve? Okay, maybe you'll feel better, maybe you feel really betrayed. But if you look deep inside your heart, the person you fell in love with is still there somewhere. They're just very confused. So, you can always file for divorce at some point in the distant future, but don't do it just because you're being cheated on. That's kind of a little bit going overboard. Don't kick your betraying spouse out of the house. That's not really going to help matters at all, especially if you want to reconcile. If you're not sure you want to reconcile, then don't kick your spouse out of the house either. It really isn't effective at doing anything except getting your spouse out of the house. Don't start a fight. Chances are, if there is adultery, you're already having fights anyway. So why would you need another fight? And don't confront your spouse with your knowledge of the affair. This really, really doesn't help. What it probably will do is possibly start a fight, encourage your spouse to lie to you and say, no, I'm not doing anything. Or it may drive the affair underground and make it take longer to end. So the final thing here is don't demand the affair to come to an end because you can't make it end. It's going to end when it's going to end. That's not entirely true. There are things you could do to make it end, but they're really not productive. So, for example, if you were to expose the affair to a number of people, to family, to friends, to coworkers, church members, whatever, that may be effective in ending the affair. But it may also be effective in ending your marriage. So if you want to stay married, then you should not do this. Here's an interesting question. What do I do if my spouse comes clean? And you might be asking yourself, well, why would my spouse want to do that? The thing is that sooner or later, if an affair goes on for long enough, the betraying spouse has to reconcile these addictive emotions that they have where they just feel like they can't give up the relationship that they're in because they think they're in love or whatever it is they think. They're not really in love, but that's what they think. It's basically kind of dopamine addiction. With their conscience, which is plaguing them and telling them that what they're doing really is wrong and they feel guilty. So in order to legitimize the affair, what they do is they start to talk to people. They talk to their friends, they talk to their family, they'll talk to you. Anyone that will listen. Because anyone that listens helps to legitimize something that is totally illegitimate. So don't allow your spouse to talk about the affair ever. With one exception. If the affair is over, then you can do it. But while it's going on, don't let them talk about it. If they bring it up, just stop that talk of the relationship dead in its tracks and say, don't go there. That's immoral. It's offensive to me. I don't want to hear about it. Don't ask questions about the affair. Why would you want to know? What difference is it going to make? You already know your spouse is being deceitful. Why would you want them to tell you more? And do not attempt to legitimize the affair in any way. This would include things like listening to your spouse talk about the affair, giving them money to help the affair along, and so forth. Now here's what you can expect. First, you can expect that the affair is going to end because they pretty much always die. Okay? You're dealing with a relationship that's built on a foundation of lies and deception, and whenever you try to build a relationship on that kind of foundation, it really has nowhere to go. You can expect it to last anywhere from a few months to a year. Now, if you go browse the internet, you'll find a lot of different information. People will say, well, a typical affair lasts a year and a half, or it lasts 2 years, or it lasts 5 years. I don't know where these figures come from. But what I do know is that if you engage your spouse with loving kindness, the affair will end, and it will end a whole lot sooner than if you didn't do anything. And your time frame is probably a few months to a year. There are some cases where it takes longer, some where it's shorter, but that's probably about average. And this makes sense. Think back on your previous relationships, girlfriends, boyfriends you had. How long did you feel like you were in love with those people? Chances are you felt in love for maybe a period of 3 to 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit shorter. And then what happened when you stopped feeling actively in love? You probably began to argue. You began to notice your boyfriend or girlfriend's personality traits that are a little bit annoying. You may have started to have fights. And you begin to ask yourself the question, why am I involved with this person? And sooner or later, it does come to an end. And there is no exception when it comes to extramarital affairs. In fact, they're more likely to end than other kinds of relationships. However, prior to ending, you can expect a number of unpleasant things to occur. You can expect your spouse to become argumentative. You can expect them to become cold and perhaps ignore you, stop taking your phone calls, try to disengage from you. They may attempt to move out or even move out and want to have a separation. They may even file for divorce. But these situations ultimately will be temporary because they are occurring simply due to the affair fog, as it's known. The completely clouded judgment that a wayward spouse has because they're in an affair. And when that affair ends, those things are also probably going to come to an end. And when they do come to an end, you can expect the wayward spouse to return to re-engage with you. It's not guaranteed, but if you played your cards right and did all the right things, chances are that's going to happen. And then the marriage renewal process can begin. It's not going to happen before the affair has ended. But once it's over, you will then have a very powerful chance to renew your marriage. Okay? I hope that was helpful. Best luck to all of you. Again, check the links. Marriage Fitness is probably the best way out there to renew your marriage and save it from whatever kind of crisis you face, including adultery. I guarantee it. It changed my life and it can change yours. Okay? Thanks again for watching.